So I just want to point out some of my fellow in-kind colleagues who are listed here, without whom none of this work would be possible. And it's also, as you're all finding, very much a learning curve. So just as much as we're kind of in this together, is what I'd say. I think I'm sounding like a politician now. I don't mean to do that. But essentially, you know, we're really trying to build this program and make it successful. So do forgive us if we've made any mistakes or delays along the way. So as Bob mentioned in his talk on Tuesday, this is actually quite a massive program. We have 150 odd contributions from 40 odd different countries and institutes spread over the globe. And it really is quite a mammoth task to keep track of all these and make sure that we achieve our goal of making this a success, in that it's really a resource for all of us in Rubin. So how are these contributions split up? So obviously a lot of you have proposed these things, so I feel like I'm preaching to the crowd a little bit, but just to give those of you who don't know much about the in-kind program a flavor of what this actually is. So there's various types of in-kind contributions. I'm going to run kind of clockwise from the top. So we have kind of offers of independent data access centers and science processing centers. We have 12 of those. We have teams bringing in kind of value-added data sets. We have basically a lot of our contributions are on software development. There's different flavors of those, but essentially that's effort coming in either to Rubin or to the science collaborations to enable infrastructure and analysis software to achieve the goals of each of those recipients. We also have quite a broad telescope time offering from different telescopes across the world. It's actually quite a lot of hours, and it ranges from 1 to 10 meter telescopes. We have a component that's going into commissioning that you heard Juliana speak about and the people yesterday at the commissioning session. And there's also facility enhancements. A few are listed there, but a big component is what the French and the UK are contributing in terms of data reprocessing, both in France and the UK, as well as scientists and engineers from those countries. So that's the in-kind process in a snapshot. And I hope you can appreciate it's really quite diverse. So what does it mean in value? So one thing I really wanted to say is that this is a resource. So as well as growing our international community that we know, brings all of us benefit, there's also stuff coming in that you can use. So I mentioned the data sets. These will all be available to everyone. Telescope time, there is effectively time distributed by Noir Lab that will come into as part of the in-kind program. And I'm not going to go through details of that now, but there's a link here to our PCW session where we really talked about this in detail. So please, when you get the slides, or I'll put it on Slack, just follow the link and you can learn more about the resources coming in telescopes. I forgot I have a pointer here. So, it's a bit hard to manage the microphone and not step away. So we have these telescope times that we have here. We have these computing resources that Will also showed this this chart the other day. So this shows kind of the value of effort coming in from our international contributors into the science collaborations. Sorry, that's the software development. And then we have these computing resources. So a lot of things that may not be happening through the Rubin Science platform that your science collaboration needs. Potentially it's worth investigating what the international offering of CPU and storage might do for your collaboration. So please do keep these resources in mind as they're a resource for the whole community. And this, please don't take these numbers completely as they are, but these give you a rough guideline of what we're getting in terms of value, both into the collaborations, but also more generally into these different categories of in-kind contributions. So I'm going to switch now and talk a bit more procedurally, a bit like what Leanne did this morning. I'm going to go through different sections of the in-kind process. And if you want to ask questions at these breaks, please feel free to ask me rather than keep them till the end. So a lot of you obviously are very keen to know what's happening with the data rights agreements, and Bob and Phil are working tirelessly along with the agencies to get these all out to you. And hopefully, you're going to be hearing some things in the next couple of months as the first of these gets rolled out. But essentially it's a discussion between the DOE, SLAC, Aura, and Rubin, and we expect the first draft agreements to be sent out, I hope, in the next couple of months. DOE will mostly be focusing on the French and UK contributions, and then SLAC, or a mixture of SLAC and Aura, or just Aura, depending on the contents of your program, will be the ones that you liaise with for your data rights agreements. And as some of you know, the In-Kind program has started. There are contributions that are already contributing ahead of these DRAs, and the DRA will be referred to your original start date of that work. So there's a full answer to the brief one. I've just given you a brief overview of what the data rights agreement status is in the FAQ. So you obviously can't read this microfiche font, but there's a lot more information that you can then access. And again, I'll put a link up on Slack. We've had some questions and discussion this week about the kind of status for growing programs. And as Bob mentioned on Tuesday, our priority really is to get what we have approved at the moment ready, going successfully along with the data rights agreements, and Bob will review the status in spring 23. But we'll keep you informed of any changes that come from that. Some of you have also been involved, particularly those of you who are program managers for the contributions, in actually nominating your data right holders. That goes through Heather Shaughnessy at Slack, who's managing that database. And effectively, it's now taken over by Rubin. It used to be a procedure held by LSSTC. So basically every June, July, you will get a request for an update, and that goes to your program managers. And there's an active link that often the science collaborations use to check membership, but you can also check your own status by looking at the international data rights list that's on the Rubin website. Also, I'm just going to point out this document here, the data rights policy. If you ever feel unsure whether someone's a JA or a PI, it's very clearly defined in the data rights policy. Again, please look at that. One thing to note is that JAs formally don't need to be kind of associated to a particular person that they work with. That can be more of a mentor capacity in the same institution or country who's basically providing support for that JA to be a member. That allows kind of independent fellows, for example, to still be named on data rights lists. Okay, so now were there any questions on the data rights that I may defer to Bob if we get any, or on the data rights holders list before I go on to the procedure? Yeah.
My name is Johan Knappen from the IEC in Tenerife. I have a question on the JAs. Do they need to be at the same institution that has signed the in-kind agreement, or can they exceptionally be from other institutions?
Bob, could I refer that one to you?
Johan, let me go back and review what we said in the past on that, so I don't say something yet. There is some flexibility in where the JAs are for sure. In particular, whether or not they have to be at the same institution. But I want to make sure that I get it right when I give you the answer. So let me get back to you.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything on Slack? No. Okay, so this section is going to be a bit technical and a bit heavy. And since I now live in spreadsheets and Google Sheets and Google scripting, I may say things that are now obviously very natural to me now. Well, I don't know if they are, but this is where my head is at the moment. So forgive all these sheets that you're about to see. So for those of you who haven't yet, filled out, or let's say expanded what your original contribution proposals are, I would refer you to this PCW from 21, which essentially goes through the whole in-kind process and how to set up your contributions in great detail. It talks about the different stakeholders involved, for example, yourselves as contributors, and your project managers, as well as for the recipients as well. So I don't want to repeat everything that's already there. So what you're going to hear today is more of an update to what's presented there. but also in half an hour, I can't really do everything justice. So what I would say is, please do look at this. If you have any questions, you can always contact the IPC team and we can do one-to-one sessions and talk through things with you. So don't worry if I'm kind of not filling in all the gaps for you today. There's opportunities to contact us to learn more. So a lot of this stems from what we put together last year, which is the manual for in-kind contributors. Again, that is linked here, RDO 41, which is available. And we welcome feedback on it. We do know that some parts of this need updating, and we're currently in the process of updating that. If anything, again, seems unclear in RDO 41, please either fill out the feedback at this form or contact the IPC team. So basically, this gives you kind of your written overview of what the in-kind process is, and this talk and this recording and the slides also give you a bit more additional information on just how that all works and fits together. We do appreciate this is a very long and complicated document, but it's essentially split by contribution type, but it also has some useful information in terms of what's expected when on the annual timeline that I'll talk about in a moment. The other thing it does is it kind of tries to distill out responsibilities for different stakeholders within the process. So as I mentioned, we have the contribution leads, and they essentially are responsible for driving their contribution. It is expected that they're proactive, that they're the ones that then start the process of what they need to do to define their contributions. That starts with work planning and then reporting and then finally the annual evaluation. But also they must ensure that their team is embedded within the recipient group. Now, this is really valuable because if you're producing a contribution and yet your recipient group isn't engaged with you or you're not engaged with them, that obviously changes the product that's being delivered. So it's really important that engagement is key, and that's for your whole team that go towards one contribution. We also have two different flavors of recipient groups. So we have what you would have defined as the primary recipient group. So they're the main people who will be receiving your contribution. We also have secondary recipients that again were defined at the proposal stage. If there are changes to that, you should let us know. Say you want to expand the product to different recipients, that's possible to expand that to new groups. So just again, drop us a line. But essentially the primary recipients are the ones that are providing the technical direction for your contribution. They're the ones you're embedded with, the ones that are making the value from the contribution you've proposed. Secondaries also have an optional role. They can get involved as much as they want to in terms of making sure the product is useful for those two different types of groups. So the recipients really are there to just make sure the work is progressing as intended, and also to give you feedback and direction in how it should go. And they also take part in the reviewing of the progress. The program managers sit from obviously the contribution side, so they're the kind of institutional or countrywide people who are managing the whole program, and they should have an overview across all their contributions in terms of when things are starting, what resources available, also to communicate back to the IPC team if there are changes that are happening. They should also be checking when things need to happen. For example, if a contribution is about to start, they should be prompting the contribution leads to fill out their work plans, or if there are quarterly updates due, that they should be doing those. Now, I'm using terms that refer to the annual cycle, and I'm wary that I haven't actually defined the cycle yet, but I'll get onto that in a moment and hopefully it will be clear. I would refer everyone back to RDO 41 in the appendix. We have these kind of checklists by different stakeholders. So they're color coded. So you've got contributors in green, the recipients in this teal-y color, and well, I might have got the colors wrong, and program managers in blue. So you can kind of see what you need to be doing when through the annual cycle. So now I'm going to get to the cycle that perhaps I should have done the order of the slides differently, but effectively, this is where most people are this is where the in-kind program was at the state of approval. So everyone had put in their kind of proposal. We went through this evaluation stage with the CEC, which is the Contribution Evaluation Committee that was stood up by Bob. And then with Bob's approval and that of the management board, some of those contributions were then accepted as part of the in-kind program. So this is basically where we are now with the start of contributions, and the beginning of a contribution's life is the work plan. So this is basically a document that says it goes beyond what the proposal had, which for those of you that filled them out was not a huge amount of detail. The work plan is the opportunity to define the work in more detail and also talk about what your milestones and objectives are, but also to plan your work as we start going through the lifetime of the contribution. So similarly to the presentation I referred you to before for how to set up your in-kind contributions, there's also another recording here, which is a dedicated meeting we did, I think, back in May, which basically walks you through the work plan. So again, I will post all these links up on Slack, but essentially, please watch this and it will basically help you with the hurdle of doing your work plan, which again, we haven't designed to be very time consuming. It is a way of just kind of summarizing what's in the plan of work for the contribution. You don't need to put lots of bits of text with long explanation. It can also just be a bulleted list as long as it's clear what you're actually doing. And these should be submitted typically, 2 to 3 months before the start, although I'll come back a bit later and there are opportunities to fill them out even earlier, and particularly for telescope time and IDAX, we're requesting that you may do this a lot earlier. For software, I would recommend that you stick to the 2 to 3 months because things can change. And if you do these things too early, it just means additional work for everyone because you've kind of come into it too early and you haven't really understood where the current status is. So it's really worthwhile sticking to the 2 to 3 months for the software contributions. Okay, so as you can see, spreadsheets and flowcharts is where I am. So I know these look maybe a bit intimidating, but they're really hopefully kind of lead you through what a work plan workflow is. So we start with the program manager, who basically prompts the contribution lead to start the work plan if the contribution lead hasn't already started themselves. Now, these boxes are color coded by role, so the PM is in blue, or the contribution lead's stuff is in green. So essentially they start chatting to the recipient group about what's in the work plan, they edit the form, and they have 2 options then, either to submit it in progress, which means it's still being iterated on, or they can submit it as ready if the loop, or if they're happy for that to be forwarded on to the recipient team. Now there's 2 different ways people are handling this. Some people are talking to their recipient team before they set it to ready. Others are kind of using the fact that we can, in the IPC team, forward the work plan to the recipient to do that exchange through us. So that's why I kind of have these dotted lines here, in that you can choose how you want to submit this. For example, Desk like to have their iteration before it's set to ready. They have their own system for this. So we're really just going on this track. But if you want to do the iteration through the IPC team, you can keep working, keep submitting it as in progress as you go along. When you're ready, or when you want us to share that with the recipient group, you can either submit it as ready and it gets automatically forwarded. If you just want them to see kind of a nicer formatted version of your input, you can request an in progress PDF from the in-kind office and we will share that with the recipients. Once something is ready, that's when we actually take action by default. So in the in progress state, we won't do anything with your work plan. As soon as you set it to ready, it then gets forwarded to your in-kind program coordinator. They do a check and then we forward it to the recipient. What's new here is that the recipient, in the past, we've been forwarding it to the primary recipient. Now all recipients get access to the submitted work plan. So that's why I have this secondary box around there, and both your primaries and secondaries can provide feedback on the work plan. Depending on what that feedback is, if everything's great, you basically end up on the approved track. There may be minor modifications or major modifications as a result of the check. If it's major and minor, you just go back into the system and then hopefully the next time round you're in the approved stage. So that's basically the flow of the review of the work plan. Once you're approved, then your contribution is on track and ready for the next part of the cycle. So that is the link to the form for any of you who don't have it. We've also made some LSST quick link, short links for it. So hopefully, even if you can't remember exactly where it is, these links will help you, and I'll come to where all this information is stored shortly. Okay, the next stage, so you've done your work plan. We're now in this kind of annual cycle. So depending on when your work starts, you might join this cycle at any time. But essentially it's broken up by the fiscal year of Rubin, which currently runs, well, I think it always did. It runs from the 1st of October to the 30th of September every year. So Q1 is October to December, basically. So depending on when you start, you come into this, sorry, I'm going the wrong way around. You come into this circle at some point. So the first thing that's due is your quarterly report, which is basically 3 months after you've started. So up here you have a table of when those quarterly update deadlines are, and it's about, so they're the key dates of when, depending on when you start, when you submit your quarterly updates. And again, I would ask both the program managers and the contribution leads to be aware of this timeline so that you are submitting things. We're not necessarily sending out reminders at these phases. We may do in the future, but really the program managers should be aware of where things are in this cycle and prompting the contribution leads to submit their reports. Again, we've tried to make this very lightweight. There's an optional box where you summarize what you've done, but what you can also use that for is just to say where things have not gone as you planned. So again, trying to minimize the reporting you might have to do. We will assume that everything you don't report on went as planned. And then the second half of the quarterly update form is basically your plan of work for the next 3 months. So that means every quarter, you're kind of summarizing what you've done if you would like to, and then definitely you need to say what you're going to be doing for the next 3 months. The recipients then have an opportunity to look at that, the same kind of process of modification if needed, but it allows everyone to know what's happening with every contribution. So again, there's a shortcut for that I'll paste on Slack, but it will also be available on the web, which I'll come to in a moment. Okay, so there's one part of this that I didn't go through, which is the profile check. So basically what this is that if you remember when you wrote your proposals, you had like a free format text box where you kind of said, oh, in year 1, I'll do this, and year 3, I'll do this with these people. But that was very difficult for us to manage. So what we did is that we transformed that into a sheet, which is the Profile Explorer. And essentially every contribution has one of these. And we've been working with your program managers who may have contacted you to fill this out. And then for the recipients in the crowd, these profile sheets allow you to see where your resource is coming in and when it's coming in. So it's actually quite a useful thing. One thing that I just wanted to point out, I'm not going to go through this in much detail, but essentially up here in this box, I think it's cell B11, if you ever want to check your sheets, but basically that includes what you submitted. And then B12 is where you say what you've changed from the original submission. So this is a way for recipients to know if effort has changed from what they originally saw in the proposal. And that can be important because, as you know, things that may have been proposed back in 2020, if they get delayed too much, they may not be useful anymore. So that requires some intervention in terms of redefining the work or the resource. So this is really an opportunity for you to talk about the resource, communicating that to us in the IPC team, as well as to the recipient. And one thing I will point out that most people have done, but there's still a few odd ones, is that this sheet also includes the start date for a contribution. So this is just the month and year when the work actually starts. And this is really the basis of how we track progress. That's obviously the starting point. So if you haven't filled these out, we will be contacting you to make sure we have the start dates for their contribution. Even if they're in the future and you're not quite sure yet, just put in a date. We can always change these depending on your circumstances, but it's good just to have a rough month and year so that we know when things are coming in. Okay, so now moving to the next part of the cycle, which is the annual evaluation. So if I just go back to the flow chart, so we have these kind of essentially 3 quarterly updates, and the 4th one is replaced with a more holistic overview or review of where the contribution has progressed. So that's currently the phase where we are now. And this started back in September, where the contribution leads received, or the program managers received information on how to complete the annual evaluation. Essentially, this is completed by the contribution leads, it's coordinated by the program managers, it's reviewed by the recipient groups and the IPCs, and then we make a report to Bob, who will then make recommendations on the basis of that report. And this is a way for us to see where the contributions are going, and essentially, this is, again, I won't go through this in much detail, but essentially you're just filling in a form, which most of you have done. We have very few people who haven't done their annual evaluation. And then once the PM say that's all been done, which is the phase we're in now, we're basically taking over the IPC and recipient part of the review. So what was asked in this form were really 3 key questions. So who's been working, what's been achieved, and how much resource has been delivered. So again, it's not designed to be a huge heavy load on either the contribution lead or the reviewers in terms of seeing progress, but it's a way of seeing how things have progressed and where the problems might be. So again, another short link for the form for those of you who haven't done it yet, and really that's a very small fraction, so you've all got gold stars for completing things on time. And then another scary flowchart is what we're doing with the reports themselves. So as I said, the IPC team are currently now focusing on checking the reports that have been filled. And similarly, they've all been sent out to the recipient groups who are doing the same thing. So they're mostly focused on what has been achieved. And we're focusing more on who and how much has been spent. Then we're going to collate all the feedbacks. And again, we're going to collate feedback both from the primary recipient and the secondary recipient to create our final report for every contribution, which we will then share with Bob. There may be points in this next month where we might want more information from you. So that's why there's a green box here for the contribution leads and project managers, because we may have questions. So you should be prepared to hear from us. And our goal then is to finalize the report for Bob, but also you'll get your feedback before your next quarterly update is due in December. Okay, so this is the kind of revised timeline. So I'm not going to go through this in detail. Again, I'll put it on Slack and it will be on the web. But essentially, towards the end of November is when you will get your feedback. We've kind of surpassed this phase, the first 2 lines. We're in the recipient and IPC review phase. Okay, were there any questions on the process part? There's a question in Slack.
Okay, thank you, Aparjita. There is a question in Slack from Tom. If Q1 updates are due on December 1st and cover October, December, and Q2 updates cover January, March, by what avenue would you update groups, for example, if something went wrong in December? Perhaps I read the chart wrong, but does first month in 3 not get reported on after the fact each quarter?
Yeah, I appreciate that comment, and it is a little bit misleading, shall we say. So effectively, the reason why we ask for the report in the first week of December is so that the recipients have chance to look at the work for the next quarter before that quarter starts. So that's why there's this kind of 3-week gap. But essentially what that means is it knocks on to the covers work done part. So whatever you report on by week 1, for the next 3 weeks, you simply just put that in your next report. So I think I could improve the dates on here so it's a bit more clear, but essentially those last 3 weeks of every month at the end of the quarter, you simply report on it in the next quarterly update. So there's no gaps. but it really is driven by the fact that the recipients need to see your plans of work for the next 3 months before that period starts.
Tom called this a sliding report date.
Yes, I mean,
That's a cool name.
yeah, and I think the other thing is we're not being very harsh on the week one. If you need an extra week, then that's usually fine. So again, as we've all been learning about the process and putting it in place, we will try to help you with these reminders a bit more. But if you do have problems with meeting any of these, please just let us know, because I mean, that helps us, it helps the recipients know, and it also can reflect maybe things that you might need more help on as contributors.
I have one question about the annual report. So I understand that just in case if something is wrong, you can contact us for some clarification. But are you also going to contact us if everything is clear, so we don't have to wait?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you need to interrupt your planning of work. You assume that everything is good. If there's in your feedback, whether things are going well or whether there are things that need attention, you will know that in your feedback. So every contribution will receive some form of feedback at the end of the annual evaluation.
Okay, thank you very much.
And then for those of you who are recipients who are maybe doing kind of the evaluation check, so we gave a kind of rough guideline in the information that was sent to you that we expect, a typical check, if everything's going okay, to take about 10 to 15 minutes. If things are more problematic, we're expecting something like 15 to 30 minutes to finish that report. So hopefully, again, it's not a huge time commitment, but obviously that depends on the number of contributions that are coming into your recipient groups. Any other questions in the room? Okay. Okay. Yeah. So I'm almost done. So I just wanted to cover a few updates. So essentially for software, things haven't really changed from the recording that Phil made at the PCW in 21. Just to remind you again that contribution leads should be proactive in starting their work and thinking about kind of work planning, which should be 2 to 3 months before. Essentially just make sure that that happens. And we also have opportunity to maybe help you. So I'm going to talk shortly about the general pool, but one of the things we've managed to put in place is actually to have a level of consultancy from a software developer or manager. So if there are things that your recipient group and you need as a contributor in terms of requirement setting or setting up your software contributions in a good practice way, please get in touch and we can help you, but also let us know what you might need. So this is an email where you can contact all of the IPC team. But if there are things lacking that you need, please let us know and we'll see how we might be able to make that support happen. We're also thinking closely with the Link Frameworks team and seeing how software that's being developed as part of the In-Kind program and the general pool, how that might link into the Link Frameworks effort as well. We'll keep you posted on that. Then just to the general pool, so if you might remember, there was an option to provide software effort that basically is open to any recipient group to bid for as part of the In-Kind program. So we did allocate some projects back in last year. These just list what they are for those of you that are interested. But essentially we have more effort this year, and in the next few weeks we'll be releasing a call for that. We're changing the system a little bit. In the previous round, we just basically got very short proposals and made some decisions. Now with the help of the Australian team and their expertise in software development, we're actually going to be able to do this in a slightly different way, in that you submit an LOI. We then sit down with one of the software specialists to actually turn that into requirements and check the feasibility of the project before we actually allocate. So there'll be a little bit more lead time, but hopefully it will mean a more useful product comes out of it that's well defined, that can then be handed off to the software developers that we allocate to you. For telescope time, I'm not going to talk about this much, but I just wanted to reiterate that please can, those of you who have telescope time coming in, you can already start working on your work plans because some of the things that are asked of you are already known, and just use the in progress selection of the work plan. And particularly if this is an Aon contribution, it just helps the team understand the requirements and what's available for your resource. So Steve Margheim and Steve Ridgway are currently managing the telescope time effort. So please do get in touch with them or just start filling out your work plan and they'll know that things are happening. That Steve is also planning to contact the telescope time contributors over the next few months. Computing resources, basically there's time to get ready is the message. So these aren't needed till DR1, but basically work planning should focus on use cases, and Knut Olsen is responsible for this. And essentially, again, I'll make the slides available, but there are, steps that you should be taking or not, like delaying hardware purchase, but we can talk about that, or you can talk about that with Knut on an individual basis. I'm also going to point you to this white paper on the Link workshop that has lots of use cases. So again, think about what your data access center is able to provide and think about use cases that might be helping define what that should look like. And also think about the service layer for your IDACs. And there will be a planning workshop coming up in March that Knut will be in touch with you about. I'm going to skip over commissioning because we had the contribution, the talks yesterday, but essentially they will also follow a similar form for the international contributions, at least in terms of work planning and reporting, as I've already mentioned. Okay, so that's bringing me to the end of the talk. So help may be a feeling that you've experienced during being part of the In-Kind program. So just to summarize who we are. So these are, again, the wonderful people who I'm working with, and it's a really fantastic team. Agnes, who's recently joined us, is here today that some of you have met. She also led the desk session on Monday. Bob, who is here. So we're all in the room and willing to talk to anyone who would like to. And then we've got this excellent team of people who we've basically tried to split up the team into different areas of responsibility. So you'll be hearing from one or more of us. I will not go through this, but there's two different flavors of people who you might hear from the team, one specifically on the contribution and another programmatic. So that's why you might see CIPC and PIPC, so program IPC and contribution IPC. We have also set up some in-kind web pages. They're currently not visible from the main menu, but for those of you who have project, if you go to the project team part of the website, you should be able to see all this. So that hopefully will consolidate a lot of the information that I have shown to you today. And then finally, we have the Q&A session now. So we've got a few minutes left, but there's also a long list of FAQs that have recently been updated. And thanks to Agnes for taking the lead on that. And there's a lot of information in the FAQs. You can also book individual slots with us in the IPC office hours. There's a sheet link there that you can do that booking on. And I just wanted to point out again, this email address, if you ever feel lost, just email that address because one of us will pick it up. And then just to say, we'll learn more about some in-kind contributions tomorrow in the session. And I'm always around for the next few breaks if anyone wants to come and talk to us. So thank you.
Thank you very much. We have a few questions in Slack, so I want to give them priority now. And so Will Clarkson asks, we've heard the recommendation to leverage in-kind contribution to strengthen research proposals to other bodies. How do proposers learn what in-kind contributions are approved and or on the way? Is a list of all approved international in-kind contributions posted publicly, no matter the recipient group, at what level of details?
So on these web pages, which are there, there's a list, there's a page specifically on the program.
Yes, I just see a follow-up then that Bill says, oh, I wasn't aware of this.
Yes, because we just announced, I mean, we literally just announced it here at the meeting. So, yeah.
He answered his own question.
Okay.
Thank you, Bill. The Sugata Kaviraj asked, will there be further calls for in-kind proposals in the future for new contributors? Maybe Sugata is here.
Yeah, so I think Bob answered this as well. So essentially, our priority really has to be to make the current program working smoothly and delivering, as well as the DRAs. So as we mentioned, in March or April, in the spring next year, is when Bob will take stock of where we are and see if there is further opportunities. But currently, I would have to say there isn't an opportunity to expand. But I don't know, Bob, if you want to expand on that.
So as we go through these next few months, and as Aparjita said, we assess the program, where we're at, what contributions we have that will ensure success of Rubin and LSST, and what more we might want to do. We will definitely communicate with the community early next year what the opportunity might be for new contributions.
Thanks.
There is another follow-up on the list of in-kind contribution, because this link that Will provided seems to be behind the login.
Yeah. So currently the pages, you need to have a project account on those project web pages. It's the same account that you use, say, to sign up to the PCW. So most of you should have them, but I hadn't appreciated that there may be people who don't have them. So we will look at that and think about whether we need to move things and make things more publicly available. But you can also just contact us and we can send you a PDF of all the contributions.
Thank you. I mean, we are over the hour, on top of the hour, but if there's any urgent, yes, too urgent.
Sorry, I apologize for talking too long.
It's a quick question there, because I think it's just relevant to maybe give the feedback, because the relevant people in the room. So although we can't apply for the observing time that is part of the in-kind contribution, we have collaborators who can. And I know that MOUs are being signed, but just to point out that, like, it's next year sometime that we're going to have to start planning or thinking about what things we're going to apply for in 2024A. And so it'd be really great if there's a website that can go up or something that's telling us about this observing time as these MOUs are being signed, where it can be announced. So just thinking about if there's some way that we can know about this, because we kind of roughly know, but we don't really know the details. So the sooner we can get this out, even piecemeal, will really help planning on a big observing proposals and cross, VLT, ESO proposals with these US accessible in-kinds.
Sure. So I should have mentioned Steve Markheim's working on policy documents for that. So you will have information in the next couple of months, and he'll also do a specific meeting on that with the community. And also just say, so I think, and Bob can correct me if I'm wrong, this is under Noir Lab's normal open skies policy. So essentially, people can apply. You shouldn't feel that you're restricted not to, but obviously collaborations are also welcome to join and make use of that time. And it doesn't necessarily have to be Rubin follow-up, as far as I understand as well.
Just regarding Will Clarkson's question about how the SCs can engage with these contributions, I really encourage the collaborations to set aside time to explicitly inform themselves, come back to us if you need more input about what the contributions are, and think about how, as a collaboration, you can best take advantage of some of these things. So don't just leave it to a few people engaged in the collaboration to think about it, but explicitly try and have this discussion with the larger group, because I think there really are a lot of resources here that can help people get the science done that they want to do.
Thanks.
I apologize, but I'm just going to take another question from the Slack, because I think it's kind of important. Terry Sloan asked, any news on the availability of the contribution viewer to provide access to a program's quarterlies, annuals, evaluations? It's kind of...
Yeah, it's a good question, Terry. So basically, there's a couple of viewers that have been sent out. So the recipients received a viewer that gives them access for the whole history of a contribution. So that starts with the work planning right through to the annual evaluation. The programs received something similar, which is called the program viewer, which again is a spreadsheet, but currently they only have it in PDF form, but all the links in those sheets are active, so you can access all the documentation. The contribution viewer that I showed back in, I think it was in May, there's an issue with it in that it's very slow because it's trying to load all the history, including all the proposal text into it. So I'm just trying to make it a bit more stable, but it will be accessible to you, and that will be basically, you put in a code for a particular contribution and you can see its whole history from proposal right through to the evaluation. I just need a bit more time to make it work well.
Amazing. Okay. Thank you very much. And let's thank Aparjita and all